Today, George and Valeria got married. Everything was wonderful. The evening in a cafe. On this occasion, the plans for the future, Valeria's dreams of a wedding dress, a month-long trip to some sunny and warm country, and many other little things that lovers always talk about when they make the first decisive step toward life together. After walking Valeria home, a happy George smiled and took his phone out of his pocket and pressed the call button. "Hello, Mom." "Hi, how are you?" "Hello, son," he heard his mother's cheerful ringing voice. "Your father and I are doing fine." "And how are you?" "Fine, Mom's in a great mood," George thought cheerfully, and continued, "Valeria and I have decided to become husband and wife." "So, your favorite son is finally getting married. Are you glad?" There was silence. "Hello, Mother, can you hear me?" "Hello?" "There's some problems with the connection. I'll call you right back." George pressed the call button again. "Hello, Mother, can you hear me?" "Hello, I hear you." His mother's muffled voice came out after a pause, with not even a hint of the joyful mood with which she had originally greeted her son. "I say that Valeria and I have decided to get married," George said. "I heard," the same voice replied. "Well, and I don't understand something," George mouthed still cheerfully. "What don't you understand?" the mother retorted tiredly. "And well, where are the congratulations? Aren't you glad?" "I'm glad." "I'm very happy for you, son," replied the monotone voice, and after a pause, "Son, it's late now, and I have to work tomorrow. So, we'll talk about it tomorrow, okay?" George always had a trusting relationship with his parents, especially his mother. George not only loved his mother, he also had great respect for her as a person, for her determination, for her ability to find a way out of any situation, for her wisdom, severity, and at the same time, some lightness in her relationships. "You have a great mom," his friends often said enviously to him as a child, and George was in complete agreement with them. In his school years, then his college years, and even now when he worked in a good company and a good job, earning several times more than both of his parents, his mother was still the coolest, and her opinion was always important to him. His mother was acquainted with all of his girlfriends and always supported all the wild fantasies of a life together with his next girlfriend. His girlfriends liked George's mother, Anna, as well, and after meeting her for the first time, they were no longer depressed about how to behave in the presence of Anna. All except Valeria. It all started with the picture. Here, we have to digress a little and go back 14 years when George went to university and started dating a pretty girl named Betty. Everyone falls in love quickly in adolescence, and the crush passes just as quickly, but that's not important. What matters is that in those short periods of falling in love, young people really are the happiest people on the planet. And of course, it is maddening to at least share the great joy and happiness with the people closest to them. George was no exception, and when one day the guy, slightly embarrassed, asked his mother, "Mom, can I come with a girl for Christmas?" Anna smiled and shook her head vigorously. "Of course, you can." She asked about Betty for a long time, and then she said, "Son, do you have a picture of Betty?" "Of course, I have a picture." "Well, show me. I want to look closely." Anna looked at all the pictures of Betty for a long time, and then she asked, "What does Betty like to eat?" "We have to consider her food preferences too." "I don't know," George replied confusedly. "Find out right away and tell me." At the party, Betty was pleasantly overwhelmed by the wonderful reception of her beloved's parents, and after a while, she felt as if she had known Anna all her life. "Mom, did you like Betty?" asked George the next day. "I liked her. She's a good girl," Anna responded cheerfully. "Did Betty like it at our place?" Of course, she was delighted. "Well, that's nice." They talked and laughed a long time. Then George was very happy that his mother spoke so well of his girlfriend, and even the faults mentioned in passing, in his mother's opinion, looked cute and funny. Then George and Betty's young love affair somehow ended quickly, without anguish, without accusations or tantrums. Just ended, as it does when you're only 18, and they remained good friends. George had other girls, but Anna always asked to see their pictures before she met them. George sighed heavily and walked on. He was sad and a little hurt by his mother's attitude toward Valeria. And most importantly, he now did not understand, absolutely did not understand, his mother, her logic. Carol came to his mind at once. For some reason, they had met by chance at his friend's wedding. At that time, George was already graduating from university, and Carol had just begun. The bright girl with piercings, pink hair, and a ringing laugh was hard not to notice in the crowd of guests. It was absolutely not his type. On the contrary, usually, such girls annoyed him, and besides, neither her figure nor her looks shone well. "What are you sitting around for?" Carol ran up to him. "Come quickly. I don't have enough couples for the contest." She grabbed George by the arm and dragged him into the circle where there were fun contests. Her momentum was so impetuous and unexpected, and her eyes glittered with so much joyous excitement that George himself did not realize how he found himself in the thick of the contest. Everyone was yelling, clapping their hands, laughing, bright pink hair fluttering in front of the guy's nose, a pile of earrings in her ears and nose glittering and flashing, merging with the even more sparkling eyes of the girl herself, and her laughter was so infectious that George stopped his feeble resistance to break out of the circle and submitted to the event program she showered at him so excitedly. "Come on, hurry up, catch that." By the end of the fun, George no longer noticed the pink hair or the piercings or anything. There was just a young and cheerful girl, Carol, who he didn't want to say goodbye to forever. They began dating, and Christmas was approaching again. "Mom, I think I've met my destiny. Her name is Carol, and we're going to get married after I graduate." "Oh, that's wonderful," Mom replied. "I'm very happy for you, son. And I understand that you're going to introduce us to your bride at the party." "Well, yes, only you know, Mother, you won't like her." George lowered his eyes. "And why not?" exclaimed Anna in surprise. "Is she ugly, crooked, and slanted?" "Yes, even if she is, that's not the main thing. The main thing is that the person is good. And since you love her so much and you feel good with her, then—" "Mom, I've never loved anyone so much," the son interrupted. "Carol is a very nice girl, kind, helpful, intelligent, well, here's her picture, give it a look." He gave his mother the phone firmly. "Oh my God!" Anna cried out in surprise. "Yes, indeed," George sighed heavily. "Yes, that's the way she is." His mother perused the pictures, occasionally commenting, "It's a good thing it's not green, pink is closer to natural." Anna was flipping through the pictures on her phone, and her exclamations first became quieter, then grumble, then a sniffle, and then everything fell silent. George waited patiently, picking words in his mind to justify his girlfriend's appearance. "A very nice girl," Anna finally said, smiling. "True, her appearance is strange, but the girl is very nice, sincere. Here's this picture, look. This is what happiness looks like in all these extra earrings. She will take off herself in time. And I even like these in her ears, beautiful and original." "Yeah, she's already taken some of it off," George exhaled in relief. "Did you really like her?" "Yes, you can see how much she loves you, and you're so happy." Mother talked at length then about the pictures and the people in them and the energy, but George hardly listened to her. He felt even happier that Mother liked Carol. These memories made it hard, even dry in the throat. George loved Carol very much. Why did he love her, though? He still loved her somewhere deep down in his heart. He just tried not to think about her all those years. Then, 9 years ago, they had parted, and even now, George could not say exactly why. Carol had been the initiator. She had cried, saying she loved him very much, that she was terribly sorry, but she could not marry him now, and in general, it was better for them not to see each other anymore. In response to his insistent questions, George never heard a coherent answer but gave in to the girl's request not to call and not to seek a meeting. He gave in because he loved her too. And how upset his mother was, she kept urging him to meet the girl one more time, to find out the reason. But he promised Carol. "Oh, you fool. God, you're such a fool," exclaimed Anna. "Mother, I beg you, let's close the subject, all right? Let's close it, but you're making a mistake." "It is my mistake, Mother." Yours, sighed heavily, and they never came back to the subject again. Now walking home through the dark streets of the city, George mentally said to himself, "Yes, I was a fool." It felt even worse, and then suddenly, there was a sudden anger at his mother. Why the hell is she turning against Valeria? Actually, she should be happy that her 30-year-old son is getting married. 9 years ago, after breaking up with Carol, George tried to numb the pain of the breakup with work, stopped going to fun parties with friends, he didn't want to work, replaced everything, and it had its positive results. And now, George was quite a successful and wealthy young man. But there was no simple human happiness in the form of a family. He had not met a girl who would make his heart race, ready to burst out or freeze to the point where it was hard to breathe. To be honest, George wasn't looking for anyone because he didn't really want to. Anna was very proud of her son's success, and seeing that George tried to work even harder, even better, he loved his mother very much. "Mom, if I never get married, will you be very upset?" George once asked. "Why won't you get married?" the woman exclaimed. "I'm 30 years old now, and I haven't met anyone. There are plenty of good girls, but I never could love again." "So, you haven't met your destiny yet. But I may never meet her, and you'll be left without grandchildren." George smiled sadly. "Oh, you've got something to be sad about if you think I can't live without grandchildren." "You shouldn't," laughed his mother. "Well, seriously, believe me, son, you don't have to ruin your life just so I can have grandchildren. You're bound to being another girl you love, and everything will be fine with you, quiet George." "How is Carol living now?" asked Anna very timidly. The son sighed heavily. "I don't know. After all, we agreed then that she would call me herself if she saw fit, and I would not take the initiative." "You were right, Mother. I was a fool at the time, but what can I say now? It's been so many years. She loved you so much. I'm so sorry. I loved her too, and I'm sorry too." George and Valeria met by chance. It was spring, the flowers were blooming, and that's what caught his girlfriend's attention. They were taking pictures. "What a beautiful figure she has." George involuntarily slowed his pace and suddenly, unexpectedly to himself, suggested, "Girls, let me take a picture of you together." The photo shoot was really a success. Valeria, the owner of an ideal figure and no less beautiful face, introduced herself. Their romance developed rapidly. In just a month, Valeria was already presenting George to her parents as her fiancé. George was very flattered to have such a beautiful girl by his side, and he wanted a family. Some moments in Valeria's behavior George did not like, but still, something about her made his heart beat more often. "So why shouldn't she be my wife? At least she's pretty, and how happy her mother will be," the boy pondered. Valeria hurried on. "When will you introduce me to your parents, George?" George didn't like it. "You should be more modest," he thought. But before Valeria arched her back seductively, flicked her perfectly painted eyelashes, and the idea of modesty disappeared. "Mom, what are you and Dad's plans for the weekend?" asked George. "None, just the usual." "But what is this?" His mother's eyes flashed with curiosity. "I'd like you to meet my girlfriend if you don't mind." George proudly held out his mother's phone, counting on his mother's approval. Anna studied the photo for a long time. George waited for the usual comments, but his mother was stubbornly silent. Finally, she held out the phone to her son and said just one word, "Beautiful." He waited for questions, but there were none. "Mom, what do you think of Valeria?" "She's beautiful," Anna repeated. "Say it again." And then she fidgeted, starting to avert her eyes. "George, you know you're not a young boy anymore, and I don't want to meet all your girls like I used to." "I don't need to. I'll meet the one you marry." "Sorry." Then he realized that his mother didn't like Valeria. He not just didn't like her, but very much didn't like her. Meanwhile, the young people's relationship was developing, and George was more and more inclined to think about proposing to Valeria. The only thing that was weighing on him a bit was his mother's stubborn unwillingness to talk about their relationship with Valeria. "Mother, why do you dislike her so much?" said George. "I didn't say that," replied his mother. "You didn't, but I can see everything." "What do you want from me?" cried Anna. "You are a grown man, and you have eyes and ears like mine. What is acceptable to one does not have to be accepted by the other. You love Valeria, fine, but that doesn't mean I have to love her too." The woman suddenly fell silent. "Son, I can't explain my emotions for Valeria. After all, it's your life. I'm human too, and I could be wrong. Anyway, I want you to know that I will accept your choice, and I won't make any intrigues." "I hear you, Mother." So today George made his choice. He and Valeria decided to become husband and wife. And what a beautiful day it was. And his mother? She ruined everything with her indifference. George was hurt to tears. That's why he was angry. You could at least pretend to be happy, George thought angrily. The next day, George was telling his parents about his and Valeria's wedding plans. The father asked something, clarified something, showing a keen interest in such an important event in his son's life. The mother, on the other hand, was stubbornly silent. "Mom, can you at least pretend to be interested in this?" George said angrily. "I can," and replied obediently and tried to smile. "Is that better?" "No, Mom, come on, what are you doing?" said George softly. "Already, you don't know Valeria at all. Here, you get to know her better. You're bound to like her. Of course, she has flaws, but I'm no angel either. And her parents are normal people. Well, maybe you won't be very interested in them, but they're not bad." Yes, you're right, son," Anna interrupted him. "I understand everything perfectly. If this wedding is so important to their family, well, on Sunday, we'll all go to them together. Don't worry, I'll be set by then, and everything will be fine." "What's wrong with you?" asked Anna's husband as George left. "Leave me alone." "I don't know. Nothing good will come of it. That you don't like your future daughter-in-law is understandable," the husband grinned, "but it's not like you have to live with her. Have you seen pictures of her?" "I've seen her. I think she's a very pretty and showy girl." It's understandable that George couldn't miss one. I wouldn't have passed by either. There. She's beautiful, and that's it. A very pretty shell. But underneath it is cold and empty. And I'm sorry, but you're talking nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's not my fault that most people don't know how to look at pictures. You just have to look carefully. You can pretend perfectly, but a photo reflects just one moment, a split second. And now, the pile of pictures, you eventually get to see the true person, their essence. And this Valeria doesn't even love George. She loves only herself, and she always will. Anna cried with helplessness. What can I tell him? What can I explain? Even you don't believe me. You don't take it seriously. And then, after all, I'm just a woman. I could be wrong. That's why I feel so lousy and pretending, I've always been bad at it. I really want to be wrong. Really? Do you believe me? I believe you. Don't cry. George is a grown man, let him figure it out for himself. George, my dad's car broke down, and it'll be in the shop until Monday, Valeria said into the phone, and my parents were going to go to the cottage on Saturday morning. Could you drive them? Because my mom is nervous. Valeria smiled. Yeah, no problem, George replied. Early Saturday morning, George drove his future in-laws to the summer house. He had been there in the summer. It was nice, fresh air, nature. When the father-in-law-to-be finally opened the gate, George froze in place, stunned by what he saw. The skinny dog and cat were staring at him. Are you still alive? Get out of the way. Get underfoot, the future mother-in-law shouted angrily, heading for the house. Let's get out of here. The future father-in-law stomped his foot, following his wife. The animals jumped awkwardly aside, seeing their owners off with a wistful look. That's Jack and Felix, isn't it? That's them, isn't it? George looked confusedly at Valeria, who approached. Well, yes, that's them, the girl nodded indifferently. I thought you took them into town when you left. No, Valeria wrinkled her pretty nose. Animals don't belong in a city apartment. But they will die here. You can't do that. The cat and the dog rushed towards George. Jack wagged his tail as hard as he could and whimpered pitifully, as if to say, well, where have you been so long? It's cold here, and there's nothing to eat. You're back at last. And Felix rubbed diligently at the guy's feet and sneezed incessantly. George, come and help. Jose can't do it by himself, called the future mother-in-law decisively. What are you fiddling with those animals for, Barbara? Are you leaving them here all winter? What will happen to them? They are animals and have to feed themselves. Come on, hurry up, we have a lot to do. But they'll die. Then that's their fate. They quickly finished their business and got into the car, while Felix and Jack sat alone in the yard, huddled together and seeing people off with a desperate look. For them too, no miracle had happened on this visit, and they had to wait again, hungry more and more, the cold inexorably creeping through their fur, and less energy left. All the way to town, the father-in-law and mother-in-law were talking. They were discussing tomorrow's meeting with George's parents, asking him something. Valeria was talking about her dress and hairstyle, asking what she should wear to finally make her future mother-in-law like her. George heard them, but didn't listen. He was driving on automatic, and before his eyes flashed the image of Felix and Jack begging for help. Well, finally, Valeria pronounced as the last bag was carried into the apartment. Take me to a salon, I want to try to charm your mother tomorrow. After all. A flirtatious smile buried her snow-white teeth slightly, a pride of superiority flashed in her eyes for a moment. Valeria, don't you feel sorry for them at all? Who, Jack and Felix? God, you really are weird. Why feel sorry for them? If they don't make it, we'll get others in the spring. It's not the first time. Let's go charm your mother. Dropping Valeria off at the salon, he drove in the direction of the dacha village. In his mind, one by one, the ugly episodes from life and the behavior of Valeria, then he didn't pay much attention to it because he didn't want to, but they were. But Valeria herself was very beautiful. Felix, Jack, George, called to the animals at the locked gate, come here, let's go, warm, come on, what are you? The cat and the dog crawled outside and stared incredulously at the man. Felix, sneezing constantly, his eyes watering, and in his mouth, the jar is, the kitty couldn't breathe through his nose because of a cold. George picked the cat up in his arms and opened the back door of the car. Come on, Jack, he drove into town, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The hushed dog and cat, and thought angrily, beautiful, beautiful, soulless doll. Anna put her coat out in the hallway, getting ready for her manicure to go to Valeria's parents tomorrow. She calmed down and pulled herself together. Suddenly, the front door opened. "George, sorry, this isn't a good time. I have a manicure appointment for tomorrow. I'm running out, Mom." No manicure here, and the son pulled the poor, sickly cat out from behind the sinus of his jacket, and his skinny dog sat quietly at his feet. "Who's that?" Anna's eyes rounded. "They're Valeria and her family's animals. They abandoned them at the cottage. I found out today by accident. There won't be a wedding." Then the two of them washed the dog and the cat, tried them, took them to the vet. Jack was fine, but Felix turned out to be seriously ill and was given a course of antibiotic shots and vitamins. George took the animals back to his apartment near midnight. Valeria called. "I'm so beautiful," she said enthusiastically. "Valeria, you really are a beauty. After what I saw today at the cottage, we have nothing more to talk about. There won't be a wedding." George dropped the call and blocked Valeria's number. George dutifully took Felix to the vet, and one day he ran into Carol. Or rather, he first bumped into the big old dog, who could barely move his paws anymore, and he turned his gaze to his owner. And when he turned his gaze to the owner, or rather, his mistress, Carol, George no longer did. She had pink hair and piercings in her ears, no longer the sparkle in her eyes. She was a tired young woman standing before him. But something exploded in her chest, causing her heart to stop for a moment, and then to beat at breakneck speed. "I was so young and stupid then," Carol said, sitting on the bench. "I was curious about everything. I wanted to try it myself for the sake of curiosity. So, I got into a cult. At first, it was interesting and great. But when I had an epiphany, I couldn't get out of there. They wouldn't let go, threatened the lives of my loved ones. I was very afraid that someone would get hurt. That's why I left, thinking that I could handle it on my own. I couldn't. When my parents found out about everything, they went to the police, but it wasn't that easy. Finally, they dealt with the cult, but my mother couldn't stand it, and she had a heart attack. I was the one who killed my mother. Why didn't you call me? I was waiting. I felt then that I had no right to happiness. My father sometimes looked at me like that. I know he blamed me for my mother's death. I broke down completely, morally. I won't to tell you anymore. And now, how do you live now? My son is 4 years old. Does your husband love you? Don't have any husband. So there was one that he left and left me his old dog, said. He realized we weren't on our way, Mom. I want to show you my fiancée. George held out his mother's phone firmly. So, that's Carol, exclaimed Anna, taking a long look at her picture. Only she's very unhappy. She still loves you very much, and she's very hopeful and afraid. Good girl, the mother finished in a whisper. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.